Hello my dear friends, myself is Dr. Avinash Amangi. I am from Gurudev Academy. Today we are going to discuss with respect to the SSLC Model Question Paper, that is what 2, right? And majorly we are going to discuss with respect to the science inside that biology part. Like I am your biology mentor, and based on that we are going to discuss with respect to the what this particularly some of the what few questions which are actually arised into this particularly model question paper. Inside that, first if you find out, they have given one multiple choice question, right? So first we have to understand what type of a what question it is, right? So what they mentioned, it is small intestine with respect to that what villi, and villi is a part of what small intestine. Same way only what we have to find out, lungs, right? And lungs, and they have given something called as what gap here. So there we have to fill this particularly what word, the correct match what we have to find out. So option what they have given, one is bronchi, alveoli, nephron and a diaphragm, right? So these are the what, the particularly options what they have given. Based on the options only we have to match. So how we are going to match? First we have to find out this particularly small intestine, right? So particularly a small intestine, with respect to that they have matched one terminology, that is nothing but what, the villi, right? So we have to understand how this particularly villi is related with respect to the small intestine, right? Like that only the related terminologies with respect how villi is related with respect to the small intestine, like that only the same type what we have to find out with respect to the lungs. So if you find out with respect to the answer over here, that is majorly if you find out, we'll first discuss with respect to the small intestine and villi relationship, right? So the relationship present in the analog is that just as the small intestine contains what, the particularly villi, right, to increase surface area for the absorption. So same type of what functions what we have to find out over here with respect to the what, even lungs, right? So like that only, with respect to that only, if we consider the lungs contains what, alveoli, right? So for what purpose? Even it is going to increase the surface area for the gaseous exchange. So here answer is what, the particularly alveoli. Now bronchi is even a part of what, the particularly respiratory system. Even with respect to the lungs are going to be covered up by means of what, diaphragm. So you should not get confused with respect to these particularly terminologies. Nephrons you are going to find out with respect to the what, kidneys, right? So what it is, like small intestine related with respect to the what, villi. Villi is going to give what, surface area for the absorption, right? Absorption of what, nutrient. Same way only lung where you will find out what the presence of this particular alveoli, which is even going to give us a surface area for absorption purpose. Majorly what it is going to carry out, gaseous exchange, right? So that what you should remember, and based on that only you have to answer this particularly what questions, right? Then they have given one more, like what, multiple choice question, that a trait that cannot be inherited among the following is, right? The character which is to be what, inherited from parent to the offspring, or from the ancestor to the what, the whatever the generation is, like that only. Like what we know, we have studied regarding Mendelian concepts, right? So genes which are going to get what, inherit. Now gene itself is going to give us what, phenotypic character. So with respect to the what options only, we have to find out this particularly what, a trait which the trait that cannot be inherited, right? So the character or these characters what they have given inside this, which is not inherited to the what, generation to generation. Now if you consider shape of the eye, right, eye character can be what, inherited. Then if you consider color of the hair, yes, color of the hair is even can be what, inherited, right? So like that, type of a what, blood group, yes, blood group even can be what, inherited, and it can form something called as what, combinations, right? But if you consider the playing skills, this playing skills we are going to acquire by means of what, ourselves, right? If we go on carrying out the practices, based on that only, like what, we can develop this particularly what, playing skills. So this character, if you find out the playing skill, it is a individual character, right? It is not to be what, inherited from what, generation to generation. The person is going to inherit, right? So the person is going to take up this particularly character based on its based on their individuality, right? So likewise, if you consider, so let's see the particularly what answer each questions step by step, right? The trait, if you consider, that cannot be what inherited among the what option is D, right? So playing skill, and this is because playing skills are what acquired through practice and even what the experiences, right? Then not inherited what genetically. So these, whatever the shape of the eye, if you consider, genetically it can be inherited. The color, if you consider color of the hair, that even can be what is genetically inherited. Then the type of what blood group, if you consider, that even can be what inherited genetically. But the playing skill, we are going to acquire it by particular person, individual person is going to acquire by means of practice and even by means of what experience. So with respect to this question, right, what they have asked, which cannot be inherited, right? So which cannot be inherited? Playing skill cannot be what inherited over here, right? Then next question is what is actually transpiration, right? Majorly what we know, the waters are to be what absorbed by means of what root, right? Now root is going to carry out water absorption. Now that water is going to move towards what the particularly leaf, right? Now excess amount of water, if it is there, then the water is going to get what evaporate, right? So simplification wise, if you consider what is transpiration, it is nothing but a loss of a water in the form of water vapor, right? So that itself what we are going to call it as transpiration, right? So here transpiration is the process in which the plant releases what water, right? Releases water inside it in the form of what moisture or water vapor, right? It is going to release the water, plant is going to release the water what outside by means of either by means of what moisture or by means of water vapor, right? Consider like what the root consumes some amount of what water from the particularly what soil, right? And the rest evaporates in the atmosphere, right? Rest is going to evaporate in the what atmosphere, right? Then the parts of the plant such as stems, small pores on the what leaves and even the flowers evaporate the water to the what atmosphere, right? So overall what is going to happen, root is going to absorb the water. From the water, the particularly movement of this particularly water is going to take place all part of the plant, and from there what is going to happen, water is going to get evaporate. So loss of water in the form of what water vapor, that itself is nothing but called as what transpiration. So here if you consider overall this particularly diagrammatically what they have mentioned, right? So water absorption you are going to find out, right? So water travels through this particularly plant like what from here to here, right? So likewise it is going to what travel. From there when the plant is going to get exposed to the what the particularly sun, from there from the leaves what is going to happen, this water is going to get evaporate, right? So loss of a water in the form of what water vapor, that itself what we are going to call it as transpiration, that itself is going to be called as what transpiration. And this transpiration is necessary for the water transport of what minerals even, right? So which is going to take place, absorption of a mineral is going to take place from the what root is going to absorb the mineral, root is going to absorb the water, from there it is going to move all part of the plant, and this transpiration itself creates something called as what pull, and based on that pull only the large distance can be what covered up, right? So that is what actually this particularly transpiration is, right? Then next question, that is nothing but what the folding of this particularly what leaves sensitive leaves of the what sensitive plant, the folding up of leaves of sensitive plant, that is nothing but what touch me not, right? On touching with respect to the word finger is not a tropic. Why? Right. So already what we have discussed before with respect to the what the previous question paper, model question paper, that they have mentioned some of this particularly tropic level or phototropism. Right. What this phototropism is, with respect to the light only plant can carry out some kind of what movement, and that itself what we are going to call it as what phototropic. And such kind of what stimulus basis, how the plant is going to like what behave. So that itself what we are going to call it as tropism. But here if you consider this particularly folding of this leaf is not the particularly what tropism. That itself what we have to explain why it is, right? Consider answer what it says. The folding up of leaves in a sensitive plant on a touching is not a particularly what a tropism, because it is non-directional, right? It is what? Non-directional movement. The tropism is what? The directional one. Like consider what sun is to the what right hand side, the plant is going to get bent towards this particularly what? The sunlight, right? So like that, that means what? It's a directional type of what? Movement, right? Where the direction of the movement of the plant part is towards the particularly what? Stimulus, right? So wherever the stimulus is, there itself this particularly plant is going to carry out movement. So that movement is directional one. But this folding of leaf is not what? It's a non-directional movement. So only we cannot consider it as what? The tropic movement, right? So this is overally like, let me clear this, right? So this is how the movement, like after touching, how these particularly leaves are going to get like what? Fold up, right? This is touch me not plant, and even what we are going to call it as scientifically Mimosa pudica, right? So why this is occurring? This is because of what? Thigmonasty. This is because of what? Thigmonasty. The movement or responses of a part of the plant in response to the what? Touch, irrespective of the what? Direction, right? When you touch with respect to that only, how the plant is going to behave, right? So which is what? Non-directional one, right? So that itself what they are saying, the movement or the response of the part of the plant in response to the what? Touch, irrespective of what? Whatever the direction is, right? Of stimulus is known as what? Thigmonasty. It is known to be what? Thigmonasty or sesamonasty, what we are going to call it as, right? So example here what they have mentioned, the leaves of this Mimosa pudica, right? An example of what? This particularly, right? As these leaves fold and drop when touched, right? When you are going to touch this particularly part, it is going to get what? Fold up, right? Whatever this moment what we are going to call it as thigmonasty. This is known to be the thigmonasty type of what? The moment, right? So that itself what they have asked, and even what they have asked is touching with the finger is not a tropism. Why it is not a tropism? It is a non-directional movement, right? And this with respect to the touching only, if the leaves are going to get fold up, and which is irrespective of what? Any direction, what we are going to call it as thigmonasty. So reason for what it is touching with the finger is not a tropism, because it is nothing but what? It's a thigmonasty type of what? Movement what we are going to see here, right? So next question here what? The particularly mention any two advantages of what? This particularly vegetative propagation, right? So they are asking how this particularly vegetative propagation is what? Useful or advantages of this particularly type of what? Reproduction. You should understand that vegetative type of what? Reproduction is even a part of what? Sexual reproduction. We know that what? There are what? Two types of what? Reproduction. One is asexual and one more is sexual. So vegetative mode of what? Reproduction, that is nothing but what? Vegetative propagation only, what we are going to call it as. The part of the particularly plant or part of an organism which is going to get develop into a new individual, that itself what we are going to call it as vegetative propagation, right? So we will see overall, vegetative propagation is a process in which any vegetative part of a particularly what? Plant, root, stem, or even what? Leaves gives rise to what? New plant under what? Appropriate conditions. What I have told you is the part of this particularly organism itself is going to gives rise into the what? The new organism, right? That itself what we are going to call it as vegetative propagation or vegetative type of what? Reproduction, right? So which is even a part of what? Asexual mode of what? Reproduction. Here only one parent is what? Involved, and parent part is what? Involved, right? So here if you find out what is the two advantages what they have asked? One is large number of what plants obtained in a short interval. With respect to the vegetative propagation, what we can obtain, large number of what plantlets can be what obtained with respect to the short interval period, right? Then propagation of what seedless plants is made possible, right? Propagation of what seedless plant is made possible. So seedless plant even can we can produce with respect to the what this particularly vegetative propagation. So these are the what two advantages what you are going to find out with respect to the majorly with respect to the what this particularly vegetative type of what propagation, right? Then so they have asked here what the particularly draw the diagram. Next question is what, draw the diagram showing the germination of what pollen onto the stigma and label this particularly the part of what ovary, right? So we have to draw the particularly what diagram, and here if you consider this particularly carries what the particularly 3 marks question, totally what you have to solve 2, and then that will be what 6. So drawing the diagram is what easier here. So this is what the diagram what you are going to find out. So easily you can draw something called as what the stigmatic surface like this, right? And then you are going to find out the particularly what ovary, right? So this part what we are going to call it as stigma, right? Then with respect to the stigma, what I am finding out, this long slender like structure, I am going to call it as style, right? And below the style what we are going to find out the particularly ovary, right? So like this, overally these 3 part is nothing but the female reproductive part, right? Or the female reproductive structures part. Majorly what we are going to call it as gynoecium. Majorly what we are going to call it as gynoecium, stigma, style and ovary. So what they say is, what question says, draw the diagram showing the germination of pollen tube on stigma. So onto the stigma we have to show something called as what, this particularly pollen germination, right? So what, how you are going to find out, consider this is a pollen. Now after this particularly stigma and pollen interaction, what is going to happen, the pollen tube formation what we are going to observe here, right? Now with respect to the ovary only, what we see here is inside the ovary we are going to find out what ovule. Ovule consists of what, embryo sac, right? So with respect to that only what is going to happen, this whatever the pollen tube is which is going to grow up and come and meet the particularly what, the female gametophyte. Wherever there is a presence of female gametophyte, like that only the growth of this particularly pollen tube is going to take place. So diagrammatically you can see over here what they have mentioned, the upper part is pollen grain, following to that stigma, right? Stigma to what, this pollen grain is going to carry out what, male germ cells or male gamete what we are going to call it as. Orally whatever this tube we are finding out, that is nothing but pollen tube. And this structure, this bulged part, that itself what it is, the ovary. Inside the ovary we are going to find out what, female germ cells. That is with respect to this, if you consider the inside the ovary what I am finding out, the particularly ovule, and inside the ovule only I am going to find out this particularly female germ cells, right? So female germ cells what we are going to find out over here. So with respect to the interaction of what, stigma and the particularly pollen grains are going to get what, germinate onto the what, stigmatic surface, right? So like that only, like what even they asked here, write the particularly functions of medulla and cerebellum of the particularly what, human brain, right? So they are asking the function of this particular medulla as well as what, cerebellum, alright? So as this particularly consider what it mentions here, the cardiovascular center, right, is situated where, into the what, medulla. The cardiovascular center is present with respect to the whom, the medulla. So it regulates the heart rate via the nervous system and the particularly endocrine system. So what this particularly medulla is going to carry out the function, it is majorly like what, cardiovascular center, right? So where the medulla is connected with respect to the what, nervous system and the particularly endocrine system. So all together of them, they are going to what, carry out the regulation of this particularly heart rate, right? Heart rate can be what, totally governed by means of this particularly nerve system, following with respect to the what endocrine system, and which is actually connected with respect to the what medulla. So what is exactly function of it is it regulates the heart rate via the nervous system and the particularly what endocrine system, right? Then the functions of this particularly what cerebellum, right? So next is what the particularly cerebellum here. So function of cerebellum is here the spinal cord, right? Even the sensory system, spinal cord, even what the particularly where you here you will find out the particularly whatever the spinal cord, right? Even the particularly sensory system and the brain stem and the what the particularly the brain stem, from here what the particular brain stem is going to arise, provides the information to the what cerebellum, right? So cerebellum is going to help up in to carry out what the gathering of this particularly what information. So cerebellum carries what the gathering of this particularly information. Now who is going to share up? Spinal cord, sensory system, and with respect to the what the brain system only, like the sharing of this particularly what we are going to find out the information can be what seen, right? Then likewise again one more question what they have mentioned, the nephrons are called fundamental functional unit of excretory system, right? This is one question. And one more question is what small intestine is called as what complete digestion center. Small intestine is called as what the complete digestion center, right? So these questions we will answer one by one. So first question was what the particularly nephrons are called as fundamental functional unit of what excretory system, right? So based on that the particularly what they say is nephrons are called the particularly fundamental, nephrons are called as what the fundamental functional unit of the particularly excretory system, because they are the basic structural and functional units of the kidneys. Nephrons are the what the basic structural and functional unit of what kidney, which plays a crucial role in what filtering the particularly blood, right? Then removing the particularly what waste products, waste product even can be what removed, and regulating the particularly water and the electrolyte balance into the what particularly body. So to regulation of water and even removing the particularly what waste material and even maintaining something called as what electrolytic balance into the what body is carried by means of what whom nephron. So nephron itself is called as what it's a basic structural and functional unit of what the particularly excretory system. So this is what the structure of what overall a nephron is. So nephron consists of what the particularly glomerulus, which is surrounded by means of what Bowman's capsule. Then you are going to find out what this particularly loop of Henle, right? So loop of Henle you are going to find out, right? So with respect to the loop of Henle only you are going to find out what which is going to get extended to PCT, PCT to DCT, DCT to something called as what the collecting duct, right? This is known as collecting duct, right? This is known as what collecting duct. So here you will find out this first folding what we are going to call it as PCT, proximal convoluted tubule, then following with respect to that DCT, right, distal convoluted tubule. Like that of what part you are going to find out. This is afferent arteriole, this is efferent arteriole, and this is efferent arteriole, right? So passing of the blood which is going to come up inside this particularly majorly glomerulus, and glomerulus itself is going to carry out what ultrafiltration, right? Most of the filtration is carried out with respect to here only, and whatever the part left out, right, the ions or whatever this particularly sodiums, that all, and even water reabsorption, everything is done up with respect to the PCT, DCT, following to that what Henle's loop, right, ascending Henle's loop and descending type of what Henle's loop. Like this the particularly overallly the nephron is known to be the what structural and functional unit of excretory system, and even it is a structural and functional unit of what the kidney. Kidney is a major part of what the particularly excretory system, right? So one more question was what this small intestine is called as what complete digestion center. That what we have to actually justify how it is, right? So answer if you consider the small intestine, if you consider, is called as the site for the complete digestion, because after the digestion of what protein in the stomach, all the other digestion and the absorption occurs in the particularly what small intestine, right? So most of the what protein or remain whatever the component that is going to get digested with respect to the what stomach, but remaining whatever it is like a digested one and even absorption, that everything is going to take place with respect to the whom, the small intestine, right? Then with respect to the small intestine, how this particular digestion procedure is going to be carried out with respect to the what liver, which secretes something called as what bile juice, which consists of what different enzymes which will carry out what digestion of what different type of what component. The pancreas even secrete what various digestive juice, right, to the what digest the what remaining nutrient into the what small intestine. So with respect to this particularly pancreas or even with respect to the what the particularly majorly liver, they are going to secrete this juice material which has different types of enzyme, and small inside the small intestine only remaining all type of what digestion is going to take place. So only what we are going to call it as it's a complete digestion center. It is known to be the what complete digestion center, as small intestine is connected with respect to the liver and even with respect to the what pancreas, right? So at present we'll stop here, and remaining whatever the questions we will discuss into the what next video, right? So thank you so much.